I'm the Warlord of 8 Peaks. You remember that? You're the boss.
Skarsnik, the so-called Warlord of Carrick 8 Peaks. Pah! What worthless scum! This useless greenskin starts with a gold mine and the ability to recruit a great deal of goblins and maintain them easier than anyone else, though that is where his campaign benefits begin and end. His combat ability is mediocre, his faction effects weak. Truly he is so worthless that even when you confederate him when playing as another greenskin legendary lord, you don't even really want to waste your time with this useless waste of space. Grimgor and Azag, now those are strong greenskin scum, not like this pathetic excuse of a goblin, for he isn't even a great goblin unlike Grom. A shame really, for Skarsnik is a great character in the lore, but his strategic genius isn't at all represented.
A strategic genius? What tripe that is, really. What has Skarsnik ever achieved besides proving that a goblin can be as great of a backstabber and schemer as the vile ratmen? For he learned the art of scheming from them. His so-called genius comes from having fought for control over a ruin of a city in the Badlands, wasting the great power of his forces to fight enemies in heavily entrenched positions where the vast numbers he commanded meant little. Truly the second Sun Tzu in the making. But the concept of logistics seems to have escaped the grasp of this genius. For truly Belegar had but a few hundred soldiers, vastly outnumbered, and completely dependent on supply lines that any brainless cadet in the Imperial Military Academy would have moved to cut. But not our greenskin Sun Tzu here, no. Indeed, he only won when he made a deal with the Ratmen and bribed the ogres meant to aid the dwarves, then lost everything to the backstabbing that he knew was coming regardless. If anything, we have seen how worthless Skarsnik is. A runt of a goblin with delusions of grandeur, while all his greenskin cousins are so strong that you have to plan entire campaigns around them becoming major threats. Sigmar Preserve if you start next to Grimgor. Skarsnik, a speed bump for all his neighbours, while everyone else arrives during the middle of a major three-way involving dwarves, rats and savage orcs while the runt is long dead.
Welcome everyone, Costin here with my campaign overview guide for Skarsnik, the Supreme Warlord of Carrick 8 Peaks, and the worst legendary lord of the Greenskins. That's not to say he can't have a lot of power in his campaign, because he can. He's ultimately still a Greenskin legendary lord, but he is the worst out of the entire bunch. Like when you think someone like Rom, Grimgor, Azag, and even Warzag, they are significantly more powerful in battle than he is. That intro that I put out there, that's an AI speech for Grim and Carl Franz using their voices, and I do stand by that. Now, that's not to say you can't dominate in Skarsnik's campaign. Any Greenskin legendary lord is so powerful right now that they can paint the map in their colors with relative ease because of the significant power behind the race. When it comes to valuing a legendary lord in the game, you have to look at the following things. You have to look at the campaign effects, you have to look at the lord himself, what benefits he brings, you have to look at the campaign situation from the short-term perspective, like just the starting provinces that he has nearby, the enemies that he has to deal with in the early game, mid-game, late game, that kind of situation, and their potential to be able to achieve their campaign objectives, dependent on what those are. Now, Skarsnik has weak lord effects, but he does have one very substantial, or rather two substantial campaign effects as his faction. He gets an upkeep and recruitment cost reduction of minus 40% for goblin units, and he also gets 100% experience gain with heroes, so it's much easier to level up heroes if you're playing as Skarsnik. The other two benefits, like having a chance to contain Doom Divers, it's not really that great, to be honest. I mean, Doom Divers are good units, but I would rather have some other units, like Black Orcs from Grimgor as an example. You get the unique building chain at Carrick 8 Peaks, which is pretty worthless, actually, and the major downside is you can only recruit Orc units from Carrick 8 Peaks, which means you're not going to be running with a lot of Orc units in your armies. Does that matter that much? Yes and no. It doesn't matter so much early game, but late game, when you're thinking about missing out on the Black Orcs or the Big Guns, the Boar Boys, all that kind of stuff, it does matter not having those kind of options in the course of your campaign. Now, thankfully, this doesn't go for regular lords, so you can recruit the orc war bosses and you can recruit orc shamans. If you couldn't recruit like orc shamans or black orc big bosses, with the exception of Carrick 8 Peaks, this campaign would probably be one of the worst in the game for a lot of reasons. So its faction effects, there's 2 really good benefits, but there's also some negatives. And that unique building chain, by the way, in Carrick 8 Peaks, it takes an enormous amount of time. You'll be finished with your campaign long before you'll be able to recruit Black Orcs if you're playing as Skarsnik. So just something to bear in mind when you're playing him. Lord effect-wise, he gets Lightning Strikes, though Lightning Strikes are nowhere near as powerful as they were in Warhammer 2. He will delay enemy reinforcements, but Greenskins don't have a problem fighting numerous armies. In fact, that's probably the best situation for them, just slaughtering their enemies en masse. He does replace the Wa ability with Skarsnik's Wa. Oh, okay, all well and good. And he also gets the Bad Moon Battener, which makes a unit unbreakable if it's Goblin, which is not really as much of a benefit you might think. Sometimes you do want units to break, but melee defense, melee attack causes fear. That is all pretty good. However, his special skill line is pretty bad. Well, mediocre. I mean, he gets a number of benefits to himself and to his army, but they're not really substantial benefits. I mean, some things are good, but other things not so much. I mean, under bosses, it's kind of okay, but the problem is it doesn't increase your capacity, and Goblin big bosses are probably the worst heroes for the Greenskins anyway, and since it doesn't increase your capacity, it's whatever. Night Goblin Shamans, you don't want to waste your Shaman capacity on Night Goblin Shamans when you can get Orc Shamans, so pointless when it comes to that. You do get more item gens, and you do get armor piercing damage during ambushes. But the thing is, his playstyle doesn't really work with the current Greenskin meta, because right now you really don't want to pick an ambush. You don't want to wait for an army to ambush it. And if you ambush it, like, the Greenskins are such a powerful race that they'll literally curb stomp anyone that stands in their way in a straight up fight. The only reason you might want to ambush is because you want to lure an enemy that's unwilling to attack you into a trap. And you already have an advantage in battle, so just getting a couple of ambush benefits doesn't really matter. Now, he does get a higher chance of ambush success chance. That's all well and good, but here's the problem, the major issue. When it comes to goblins, right? When it comes to goblin lords, there are 2 different skill lines. You get either the beta night sneaking. And for Skarsnik and for Night Goblin War bosses, this gives melee attack and charge bonus. Here's the thing, though. Here's the thing to understand, though, about that. You have the Goblin Great Shamans, right? And they're casters, so they're not going to be good in melee, but they have the Goblin Tide skill line. Grom has this as well, I believe. And this is a substantial benefit to the armor of your Goblin units. I mean, consider the Night Goblins. This would double their armor capacity. Goblin archers would gain a significant amount of armor from this. Nasty skulkers would double the armor that they have, which means their survivability goes up. Your chance in auto-resolve goes up. Skarsnik not having that skill makes him significantly weaker than just a regular goblin lord. Because while he might have some benefits in battles, they're going to be more than offset by the fact that he's not going to have that armor skill, so you're going to have to fight more battles in manual battles than with just a generic lord. You're going to have to fight more battles if you're going with the goblin horde, and his army is going to take more damage in the manual battles you fight. So this is why Skarsnik is pathetic. I mean, he has some good benefits, but then it's more than offset by the fact he doesn't have one of the biggest benefits that goblins do have in their campaign. Charge bonus is insignificant compared to doubling the armor on units. And just to understand, 30 armor, we're talking here Imperial units by default. And you can increase, of course, the armor even further with upgrades. you do have certain upgrades available that do increase the armor. Specifically, use them, which gives them 7 armor for goblin units. So Skarsnik doesn't work as well that well within the goblin meta, and it's the goblin meta that he's trying to push onward to. Now, you will be able to maintain ridiculous large numbers of troops from the very start of the campaign because of that economic benefit, but at the same time, Greenskins don't really need an economic benefit, and besides which, it's not even the most significant economic benefit. Someone like Azag or someone like Gringor or Grom can get so much money, can literally print money in Grom's case, that they could run an entire campaign at like minus 20,000 per turn. As long as they can fight 1 battle per turn, they'll more than make up the money because they have a sacking benefit or some other benefits when it comes to either themselves or their entire faction. In fact, Azak has a major sacking benefit for his entire faction. Grom literally prints money, and Grimgor is, well, he's Grimgor. But there is one huge benefit that Skarsnik does have beyond these 2 effects, and that is his start position. He does start with a gold mine. He needs to build it, but he does start with the ability of building a gold mine from the very beginning, so he'll have a strong early game economy. He also starts with the ability of recruiting nasty skulkers from the very start. He didn't used to, but Creative Assembly decided that he needed a buff. And he actually starts with a relatively good campaign starting position, because to the north, he has the Red Eye, right? And he can make deals with them. Ungrim will eventually wipe out the Red Eye, but by the time Ungrim does so, you're probably painting half the Badlands in your colors, and you don't have to deal with Ungrim. And even if Ungrim does decide to declare war on you, he has to take your capital, which is certainly not an easy fight. And Ungrim is by far and away the worst legendary lord for the dwarves, and he's gonna throw a bunch of slayers at you, which are gonna die in droves against your mass range power, or even in melee when we're thinking about nasty skulkers and their insane melee potential. You do have Tretch Kravental, which you can wipe out, and what's great about the situation here to the east is you have these 2 orc factions, right? You have the Darkland orcs and you have the Moon Howlers. If you move fast enough with a secondary army, you can wipe out Tretch, make alliances above these guys, and thus your eastern flank will be secure, allowing you to focus on the rest of it. One major benefit, though, with Skarsnik is he can wipe out Forgrim pretty easily. It goes the same for Forgrim. Like, if you're playing Forgrim, you can easily wipe out Skarsnik. If you're playing Skarsnik, you can easily wipe out Forgrim. I would probably say that it's actually a harder battle to wipe out Forgrim, because you actually have to take more turns to get to his capital. You have, and he's probably going to have a powerful army that you'll have to deal with just Skarsnik. You will have a bunch of nasty skulkers by that particular stage, but just be aware it is going to be a fight. But it's a winnable fight. When you win it, when you win that particular fight, you just can steamroll everything. So your early game priority: destroy this army here, take the World Edge Archway, take the High Place, recruit a bunch of nasty skulkers, get the second army, and start doing global recruitment. Not for here, but for the World Edge Archway itself. You might want to do that, like just move Skarsnik outside the settlement, recruit another lord, start doing global recruitment. The purpose of that second army will be to take Mount Silver Spear and Crookback Mountain. You also want, one of the things you want to do is get a lot of growth early on in your campaign. So yeah, get the gold mine, but for other settlements, get the idols, get the growth, get the tier 3 settlements. The reason you want to get the tier 3 is you want to get the trolls and you want to get the shaman hut. With a minor settlement, you should build the troll cave in a minor settlement at tier 2 and recruit 4 trolls. Like, a really good goblin army is one made up of a bunch of nasty skulkers, goblin archers, eventually replaced by night goblin archers, and then like 4 troll units, because trolls have siege attacker, which means that they can take down walls. The current goblin meta is one focused on trolls, goblin archers, then into night goblin archers, then of course you upgrade those units, and nasty skulkers as your main melee line. Orcs aren't so good early on, but they can be great later on, just to have a meat wall that can take some damage, while your nasty skulkers, your trolls, and your night goblin archers do a significant amount of damage. But yeah, take this entire province within 2 turns, and then move on the Silver Road. You might want to delay. The reason you might want to delay is you might want the main army of the Bloody Spears to not attack you and to be wasted fighting Forgrim. Like, you could lure Forgrim into a fight, or you could just decide not to care at all about it. Just go for Mount Squighorn very, very quickly, take it out. Just like in the first few turns, like recruit a bunch of nasty Skulkers with Skarsnik. Every settlement the Greenskins take increases their local recruitment capacity. You can have a full stack of troops, and so will Forgrim, but he's not going to have range power, which is one of the main benefits of the Dwarves. He's going to have a bunch of Dwarf Warriors, your nasty Skulkers, with the significant amount of armor-piercing damage they have, because most of their damage is armor-piercing, will just tear them to shreds. Once you've taken out Karazakarak, what should you do? Well, let's look at the campaign victory conditions. You need to take out the Crooked Moon, you need to take out Clan Ungrund and Clan Morse. I wouldn't be too worried about Clan Ungrund, though to be fair, Belegar is probably going to be the hardest one to deal with, but don't worry too much about it early on. Your goal should be to take out Carrick 8 Peaks, take out the Crooked Moon Mutinous Gets. Long term, you need to take out basically the other, the minor Greenskin factions, which will happen on its own naturally. For most of them, for pretty much all of them, unless you decide to intervene, and it's not worth to do so when it comes to it. Now, another benefit that Skarsnik does have is the way his first Wa can be declared. The Mutinous Gets have a really powerful army, which means when we consider the Mutinous Gets, although they start out with a weak strength rank, they're very quickly in the campaign, because of this very powerful starting army they have, what's going to happen is they're going to go to a very high strength rank. And so what you can do in that situation is you can declare a Wa on them, because declaring a Wa on a powerful faction will give you better benefits when you succeed with that. You might be able to declare a Wa even before you assault the Dwarven capital, or about the same time that you're about to assault the Dwarven capital. Like, if you don't have the army to just straight up storm the walls, just put it under siege, the Dwarves will eventually die, or get a second army to support you with that, depending on the difficulties you have. You might have to send your second army to support Skarsnik, you might be able to use the Wa, or you might just be able to siege the Dwarves into submission. What are your campaign goals after that? Well, one of the things you should remember when it comes to the Greenskins is the way their Confederation mechanic works. So when they kill in battle the Lord of another Greenskin faction, they can get all of their stuff. That's not really a viable plan, I'd argue, for the Bloody Spears, because their leader starts here, he gets eliminated by Forgrim on turn 1, so it's not really a viable plan with them. It might be viable for other Greenskin factions. In particular, when we're thinking about the Scabby Eye. One of the things, like, if you can get him, if you can get Spite, and if you can kill Spite in battle, doesn't matter if you win the battle. Well, it does matter if you win the battle, but doesn't matter if you kill his entire army. But if you can kill Spite in a battle and then win it, have a victory condition for that, then you can confederate his entire faction, which means you can get a bunch of these settlements. And Spite in general will take Iron Rock. So the Scabby Eye can be put under your dominion, and the reason that's useful is you can then sell the Stone Mine Tower to Warzak and make an alliance with him. Or you could not make an alliance with him, just sell it to him, so you're going to establish good relations, and then backstab Warzak, fight him in a battle, confederate him, and thus you gain control over this entire territory. Though that's not necessarily the best plan. Warzak as an ally is a formidable force. Like, Warzak will typically pump out 3-4 stacks with just his initial starting province. And he can be a really useful asset to securing your western flank against Scrag, against Belegar, the Border Princes, and even the southern flank against Clan Moors. He will be a genuine asset, and you might want to just confederate him via diplomacy. But yeah, you don't want to force a confederation with the Scabby Eye, ideally, or take their territories or whatever, and then take Barak Var, take this entire province. Just be aware that it's going to be vulnerable. Scrag might come for it. Hell, I've had Sartosa attacking Barak Var, though Vampire Coast is really bad at sieging settlements because of their low armor, and so it's very easy to survive that, even without an army. Though if you have an army, it's much, much easier. But yeah, take Barak Var. It's a 4-region province. It can be a significant economic boon. The Silver Road is also great because it's a caravan destination. So you can make some money passively by allowing Cafean caravans to go for it, or you could just destroy them and get all their money for it. Like, just have a lord, a couple of units. Depending on the distance, like, it's a bit of an RNG factor when it comes to Cafean caravans. Like, they can either move very close to your province, and in that case, to your region. In that case, you can just recruit a lord and order it to move, and if it's very, very close to the settlement, the garrison will join in, and the lord will be able to do it on the turn he's recruited, and you can then wipe out that caravan and get 10,000, 20,000, 30,000, even more money from it. Is a ridiculous amount. But yeah, you should secure the Blood River Valley, make an alliance with Warzag, then take the entirety of Death Pass. What do you do after that? Well, you're gonna come in contact with the Crooked Moon Mutinous Gets. You can either go for Carrick 8 Peaks directly, or you can send an army to take the Southern World Edge Mountains. Or you can divide it. Like, you should be able to have 3-4 armies even at this point. One of the things I did when playing this campaign most recently is I built an entire stack, started building it from turn 1, took Mount Silver Spear, because Tretch will generally take it very quickly in his campaign. Took Mount Silver Spear from Tretch, took Tretch's capital with the secondary army, eliminated Tretch, made the deal with both Darkland Orcs and the Moonhowlers, and then the army that I sent there, a full stack of nasty Skulkers and Goblin Archers. Then I took that particular army, and I marched on Karak Azul. Meanwhile, I had 2 armies in this area, taking over Death Pass, and then those 2 armies, one under Skarsnik, another one under another lord, they converged and took Karak 8 Peaks. And at that point, you're top dog in the area. Emmerich, I did get involved in a war with Emmerich, but it's like, Emmerich may be powerful, but between the Moonhowlers and between the sheer power of my armies, the Greenskin armies in general, and the sheer numbers that I'm able to throw against them, he's not going to be long for the world in that campaign. After that, you have some choices. You can either go to the south, conquer this entire territory. Though bear in mind, doing so will put you, will make you vulnerable, because you're gonna be covering a significant expanse of territory. It's probably in your better interest to just let Warzag deal with it while you take over these 2 provinces, the Blightwater and the Eastern Blightlands. Kill Queek, deal with Queek, maybe make a deal with Khalida so your southern flank can be secure. You might have to deal with Scarbrand, you might have to deal with Forik, though ideally you would delay on that, like just have a secondary or even tertiary army defending that territory, defending Blightwater, so you can focus on other things. Though Malagor can be an issue, but Warzag is more than capable of beating both Malagor and Scarbrand, provided he's not also dealing with the issue in the north. Generally what tends to happen with the AI-controlled Warzag is he throws a lot of things against the dwarves, right? If this is just an entire AI fight, right? If you're not involved in this, what tends to happen is Warzag throws a lot of things against the dwarves. He may win, he may make some progress, so does Skarsnik. But then 2 things happen. To the south, Malagor declares war on Warzag, and so does Queek, and they gank up and take his core territory while his armies are away fighting other threats. So does Skarbrand get involved. So he's got 3 issues there, but his armies are already too far north. So he eventually loses because of that. While Skarsnik, he tends to lose because of the combination of Forgrim and Ungrim. Like, Skarsnik may beat, AI Skarsnik may beat Forgrim on Legendary. I've seen it happen. But usually AI Skarsnik tends to lose. In the vast majority of campaigns I've played, like over 95% of them, what tends to happen is Forgrim holds out long enough for Ungrim to come from the north. Skarsnik's armies are depleted from fighting Ungrim, and then he ends up losing to... Skarsnik's armies are depleted from fighting Forgrim, and then Ungrim takes his capital. Queek may also interfere in this particular fight. If he interferes, like, that's just GG for him. And typically speaking, the dwarves tend to win this. I've seen it happen in from another perspective. I've seen Forgrim lose, but very, very rarely when it comes to AI control. Funnily enough, the only times I've really seen Forgrim being wiped out is when I'm playing as either Ungrim or Belagar. it is actually frustrating that because you then have to march your armies, and you've got a lot of stuff on your plate regardless, but you have to force march your armies to first save Forgrim for Skarsnik. But that's the exception, not the rule. In most campaigns, Forgrim and Ungrim tend to win. But when you're playing Skarsnik, it's not really too much of an issue. But I make the point here because of Warzag, just to know he can be a really powerful and valuable ally. Actually, all the other legendary lords are. So I would secure everything up to Blightwater over here, or maybe at least the Eastern Badlands. Wipe out Quick, send armies to deal with Emmerich, and then try and ignore your eastern flank. You don't want to expand in the Darklands, because you've got more valuable territory to the north. While these are only 2 region provinces, except Zufbar, they certainly can be very useful. You may either end up in a war with Manfred or make a deal with him. Probably better to make a deal, because then you would, if you wipe him out, you're going to have to face the Empire. But what you want to do is head to the north. Azak tends to get wiped out by the combination of Ungrim and Draika. If you take out Ungrim, Azak's going to be in a better position. But you can then also force a confederation either through battle or diplomacy on Azak. If you can get Azak as a legendary lord, that's great. I'd actually say probably the most substantial benefit, the one that's not listed anywhere, of Skarsnik's campaign is this. He starts in a central location between the Greenskin legendary lords, right? He has easy access to Warzag, Azag, and even Grimgor, which means he can confederate all of them, right? And confederating all of them, that is biblical levels of power if you can do so. The one he can't confederate is obviously Grom. My advice is, when it comes to Grom, don't even bother. If you want to use a Defeat the Legendary Lords mod, sure, Grom is certainly a decent combatant. But Grom is also one of those Legendary Lords where he's really carried by the faction effects, not his own personal combat power. Though he's also more powerful in battle than Skarsnik is, because he's got better army benefits, he's a better combatant than Skarsnik is, and he actually starts much strongly. You want to see a steamroller Greenskin campaign play either Grimgor or Grom it is pretty damn ridiculous. With Skarsnik, you do have to think, you do have to strategize, like how am I going to go, where am I going to go, because this campaign can also turn very badly very quickly. But yeah, you want to go north, you want to secure Azak, secure this territory, try and avoid getting involved in fights with Sylvania if you can, or with Kislev. Like, you don't want to end up taking over Kislev, because that means you'll encounter chaos. One of the things you may want to do for a significant amount of money is wipe out Draika, because Draika tends to do very poorly when it comes to defending her territory. Like, her army is the most powerful army in this entire area by far and away. She can fight multiple stacks and win in a manual battle. But the key to beating Draika is to understand she has a really powerful army, but it's only one army. So you can sneak forces in, wipe out the Griffinwood, let Draika be whittled down by attrition because she's going to be fighting other factions in this area as well. Let her be whittled down by attrition and just auto-resolve her army. If you have to fight her army manually, then your chances are you're going to be losing, or you're going to have the most difficult battle in your entire campaign fighting against her. She's got fear, she's got terror, she's got a lot of nasty effects, lots of nasty abilities. She's a genuine, she's a major threat to deal with from that perspective, but she only really tends to have one, maybe 1.5 armies to throw at you, and the secondary army is going to be nowhere near as powerful as her main one. You may not care about taking this territory, but you can make potential deals with the Empire, you know, Talabheim, give them the Griffinwood, establish some aggression pacts, or make some deals with Kislev, for instance. It's actually kind of funny. I've played a campaign as Azag, and I just basically made Kislev one of my finest allies in the entire campaign. Just some ideas over there. But with Skarsnik, be aggressive, take a lot of the territory, deal with Forgrim, because you don't want to end up fighting both Forgrim and Ungrim. Deal with Forgrim very quickly, then secure all this territory as the economic heart of your empire, and then you can expand whatever way you want. I would probably advise, though, going after Belegar. Belegar is the strongest legendary lord of dwarves when controlled by the AI, because as opposed to the player, I think the AI, Belegar, doesn't have the same kind of issues. I certainly believe he doesn't have plus 50% upkeep on his units, considering the number of armies he's able to take and the amount of territory he's able to take as well. But that is all. Costin here, signing out. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and enable notifications, and stay tuned for more. Next up is going to be Belagar himself.